us this evening. Now, before we begin, I'd like to recognise that we're all joining from different parts of the country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the Indigenous nations on whose land we collectively meet. In particular, for those of us from Yarra, we acknowledge the sovereignty of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people and note that this land was never ceded. YCAN pay our respects to any Indigenous people joining us today and to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to recognise the strong connection of these traditional owners with the land and emphasise the lessons we can take from their traditional practices in confronting our present climate crisis. And I'll just turn off my phone. YCAN is an independent community-based group based in the City of Yarra that exists to inspire urgent action in response to the climate emergency. One of our key aims is to foster awareness and build skills within the community, and this is where the webinar comes in. We appreciate you taking some time out on a weeknight to broaden your knowledge in a really meaningful way. This is the 6th event this year in YCAN's Climate Solutions webinar series. Generally, these are held on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and this one was just delayed because of the council caretaker mode period. And we have one more event for this year, which will be next month. I'll let Shane give you some more information about this at the end of the event. Now, I'll briefly explain how this session will run. To ensure things run as smoothly as possible, we'll pop everyone on mute. So if you have a question, please share it using the chat function. And we'll pause at several points during the presentation to field those questions. Do note as well that this session will be recorded and uploaded to our website so that we can share it as widely as possible. So with that, I'll hand over to Shane, who will introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. We're really delighted tonight to have Sophie Green to talk to us about all things waste-wise in the City of Yarra. Sophie is currently the team leader of waste minimisation for the council. Sophie's role at Yarra has seen her work on a range of behaviour change programs in the waste minimisation area, including in relation to electronic waste and single-use plastic. In the latter context, Sophie helped spearhead Yarra's successful Proudly Plastic-Free Yarra program, which worked with food traders to reduce their use of single-use plastic. I know that waste is a topic that many of you joining us tonight will feel really strongly about. And I know that it's particularly topical right now with the rollout of the purple glass-only recycling bin to households across the municipality, as well as changes to what is collected in our yellow bins. So we really do look forward to lots of questions for everyone. Sophie has informed me that the presentation structure is such that she'll stop around about 2/3 of the way through for Q&A. So again, just to reiterate Andy's point, just please pop any questions that you have in the chat and we'll go through those when Sophie takes a break. And so without further delay, I'll hand over to you, Sophie. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Andy. And thank you, YCAN, for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here talking about one of my favourite topics, waste and recycling, and what Yarra is doing to hopefully manage it better. I really appreciate that amazing acknowledgement of country that Andy provided, but also would like to acknowledge in my own speech the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting tonight, the Wurundjeri and Woi-wurrung people. And I think, as pointed out, it's particularly pertinent when having discussions around resource use and looking after our land, that we acknowledge that the traditional owners, where the land was never ceded, probably did a much better job at this than we are currently doing. So a lot to be learned from that. All right, so waste and recycling at Yarra. Just a little bit about me. So I started at Yarra about 18 months ago, and I'm new to the local council industry and new to waste and recycling. So like most of you in the room tonight, I thought I was being a pretty good little greenie by diligently cleaning and sorting my waste and putting it in the yellow recycling bin. And since working in the waste industry, I've been on quite the journey to discover the reality of Australia's waste and recycling industry, which currently faces several systemic challenges. Some of these include an over-reliance on international export markets, which has really led to very limited domestic processing and recycling infrastructure and a capacity to process and recycle onshore, and also a lack of consistent, transparent and accessible waste information and education for the community, which I'm sure you've all probably been quite frustrated with. I'm very passionate about the last one around waste education, and that's what I do, because without it, how are people who care about these issues meant to do the right thing? So I'm on a mission to improve the way we talk and communicate about waste, and hence why I'm here tonight. But despite sort of the turbulent nature of the industry in Australia, the good news is that Victoria has a pretty kick-ass plan in the Recycling Victoria policy to transform the industry, increase the efficiency in the way we collect, sort, process and reuse materials and resources, and most significantly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from the waste sector, which currently make up about 10% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the flagship programs from the state government policy, which was released earlier on in the year, was the Curbside Reform program, which is really about changing the way we collect waste from the household, including the introduction of a container deposit scheme, which many of people are very excited about, coming into effect in 2023, and also a new curbside collection service where we'll be transitioning from a 2-bin model, which we've been used to for quite some time, to a 4-bin model. And really what this program is about is looking at standardising the bin colours and what goes in each bin across different municipalities. So you move from council to council, you've got the same colour bin. That is a big thing in waste education. The second thing, it's about aligning the system to local market development. So what we're actually putting in the bin has a local end market that can be recycled, and then launching a huge community education program to support this transition. So that's happening at a state level and also at a local level. And if people are interested to learn more about that, just ask me, because I know what Sustainability Victoria are doing there. So to give you a sense of scale just around municipal solid waste, it currently represents about 20% of waste generated in Victoria. So there's different, I suppose, industries that create waste. You've got your commercial waste, construction waste, and then, your municipal solid waste representing 20%. But unlike those other streams, the recovery rate from household waste is a fair bit lower, with only 64% of household waste being sent, with 64% of household waste being sent to landfill. So we've got a big way to go in terms of reducing our diversion from landfill there. So the takeaway from this is that household waste has a big part to play in fixing the system. And that's why tonight I'm here to talk about Yarra's vision for revolutionising the way we recycle, and talk about the new curbside service that is currently rolling out across the municipality. So what is changing? Look, most of you probably are aware of this, but basically we're rolling out a 3rd bin. It's a glass bin. So from the 23rd of November, we are asking everyone to separate out their glass and put it in their glass bin. We're making some significant changes to what goes in the yellow bin, which I will talk about in a lot more detail later. And then we're also asking people to change when they're putting out those bins. So we're going to a fortnightly glass and fortnightly recycling. Now we're calling this the recycling revolution. And I know probably some of the skeptics in the room, or we've had a lot of community feedback about, why is this revolutionary? Like, it's only an extra bin. We actually used to do this about 20 years ago. It's really not that big a change. Well, there's a couple of things I'd say to that. We're really having to go back to basics with recycling. We're aiming to deliver a model that is based on transparency and is reflective and responsive to the reality of the Australian recycling industry. So it's focused on material quality, cleaning up the state of our commingled recycling bin and glass, and making sure that what we're actually collecting is fit for purpose for a local market. So Yarra's new recycling processor, APR, Australia Paper Recovery, and I'll talk about them a bit later on as well, only accepts materials that has local end markets. So they're working with manufacturers onshore to ensure that what we're taking gets processed and recycled here and sold back onto the market. And that is probably what is revolutionary about this, because there are very few recycling processors that will say that they're keeping things on shore, and therefore we're having to change what goes in that bin. So this means that, yes, a lot of products that we used to collect will no longer be going in the yellow bin, and we also have a very strong focus on high value glass. So the hand on heart, we can say, is genuinely being recycled here. And to support all this, we're having to re-educate the community about recycling. As I've said, our goal is about clean, high quality material. And we know that adjusting to some of the changes about what goes in the bin is going to be challenging for many, and some people will be starting this journey from the very, very beginning. But we are committed to supporting the community in this, and making sure that we are giving them feedback through a much stronger focus on contamination management. For a long time, the industry has been pretty slack on contamination, and we've just let a lot of what we call just recycling soup go in that bin. Well, we don't have that option anymore. So we're going to be really intentional around how we manage contamination and the feedback mechanisms we're providing to the community. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So yes, why not the food and green waste bin? We are still planning on introducing this fourth bin, and are committed to doing that in 2021. We don't have a date yet. I mean, this is not just Yarra that's committed to that. It is now state government policy. So every council in Victoria will have to, in some way, shape or form, introduce 4 bins, whether or not it's a curbside service or community drop-offs, but we will be doing a curbside service. And the reason why we've chosen glass before going FOGO, it really has to do with the lack of available international and domestic markets for recyclable material, which has put a significant strain on the industry. So we had intended rolling out a 4 bin this year. COVID has put some serious spanners in the works around our operational budget. And because the federal government is bringing in export bans around unprocessed waste, with glass being one of the first products that we will no longer be able to export in an unprocessed form, it really is a priority for the industry to clean up the glass stream and the commingled. So by separating out glass, we can improve the quality of the material, of the glass itself, as well as actually improving the other mixed recycling materials, your paper, cardboard, plastics, and aluminium, and making them more suitable to local markets when we know those international markets are closing up. So that's sort of why we've decided to prioritise glass. Many of you would have heard about Yarra's 4 bin waste trial that's been running for over 12 months now. And this, rolling out of our trial, of the service, really builds on the work we've done. We surveyed community, we trialled an education approach. We got a lot of feedback about the types of bins, the different size bins, the frequency. So a lot of the lessons from that program have fed into the design and delivery of this service. The primary purpose of that model of the trial was twofold. As I said, it was really to test a model for sorting and collecting waste from the household, which is a critical aspect of fixing Victoria's recycling system. And the actual program was funded by the state government, and a lot of the evaluation findings and the data fed into the development of the Recycling Victoria policy. So it's been a high-profile project for sure. The other focus of the trial was really about material quality and contamination management. So trying to provide clean and consistent glass that's fit for market, as well as a better commingled recycling product, so the other recyclables, that are ready for local markets as well. And the results from the trial were pretty good. We had a total diversion of waste from landfill in the trial area at 61%, which is up from 35% prior to the trial. And this is actually more than other Metro Melbourne councils, even when they've got food and organic services. So a lot of the diversion came from introducing a food and green bin, but we also saw diversion because of the change of frequency and the improvement in the quality of the recycling material not being sent to landfill. We've got a really pretty solid contamination rate for a food and green bin at about 3%, but we can probably make some wins on that. And the quality of the glass has been one of the major things. So we've got about 98% of the glass is being recovered for glass bottles and jars, which is very, very good. And then, of course, the commingled recycling, a yellow bin, we still have persistent contamination, but, and we know that's going to be a long-term challenge, as it will be with the rest of the service, but we have made a lot of gains in terms of collecting material that stays onshore and therefore not sending overseas, and with a much larger carbon footprint. So 3 bins, this is what we're all getting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through each bin about why we're accepting those things, and then I'm going to give you some more information about where that material is going and what happens to it. And then I might pause for some questions. So glass, yes, by separating glass, we can really improve both the quality of the glass and the quality of other materials, because glass breaks at every part of the collection process. It breaks in the bin, it breaks once it's put in the truck, it gets put in the truck and squished, it then gets crushed again once it gets to the material recovery facility, and then it actually shatters into all the plastics and the paper, making them a lot harder to separate and recycle. So by separating glass, we can make it a lot easier to actually separate for new glass products. The thing about glass is that it actually melts at different temperatures. So not all glass can be recycled, and so therefore we're not accepting all glass in our purple bin. We'll only be accepting glass bottles and jars. So as you'll see in the poster here, we're talking about beer bottles, wine bottles, condiment jars, pasta sauces, olive oil bottles, spirit bottles. And the back glass actually can be broken. If you've got a broken bottle, broken beer bottle, you can put it in. The main thing is that the lid is off and that the glass, that the glass is clean and has no food residue in it. Now we often, I'll just talk through what we're not accepting. So yeah, we don't want the lids. We don't accept drinking glasses, crystal glassware, window glasses, eyeglasses, broken crockery, bakeware, Pyrex, and then, as I said, glass with food and residue. So we often get asked about paper labels, and I thought I would address this because it's a good question. I mean, we will accept glass with paper labels on it, but if you want to be an amazing recycler, it would be great if you could take them off. And that's sort of the best practice. What happens is the glass goes to the processing facility, it gets crushed, and then it'll get put through a sieve where little pieces of paper or foreign objects will get separated from the glass. But of course, not everything will get caught in that sieve. So the more stuff that's in there that's a foreign, not pure glass, the lower the quality of the material, and that's how we define contamination. Glass is a material that can be processed infinitely and used when recycled. It can be used to make other glass products, and actually overall reduce the energy and use of other raw materials. So there's a big demand for recycled glass, and it's made from virgin sand, which is a finite and very expensive material. Initially, the glass from Yarra's bins will be going to a company called Alex Fraser, where it will be crushed and cleaned, and then eventually be used to replace virgin sand for road surfacing and construction. Now, whilst it's a good end use for the glass, ideally we would really like to get to glass manufacturing, because this would maximise the value chain of the glass itself and reduce resource loss. But to do this, we do need to be able to provide a consistent, clean stream of the product. So our priority at the moment is really about separating it out, getting it really clean, improving the robustness of that stream until we're much more confident that that glass is a high quality product that can go into glass to glass down the road. I will also say, just around glass, the market for glass and glass sorting, is it is still quite limited, because as I've noted, the industry is going through a process of transformation here in Australia. One of the main glass manufacturing companies, I can't remember the last acronym, but was just recently sold to Visy, which is one of the big recycling processors. And the transition to this new facility will take some time. The other thing is that there's new glass beneficiation technology that's needed to come on board in Australia, with technology like optical sorting machines that are able to identify the different quality and colour of glass through an optical sorting process. And then the better we can sort that material, the better we can remove the best quality glass for that glass-to-glass manufacturing. So we're waiting for some of this infrastructure to come on board, and I think we'll see quite a lot of change in the local glass industry in the next 5 to 10 years, especially once more councils roll out glass bins. So one of the most important changes of the new service is actually what we put in, the changes to the yellow recycling bin. Our new recycling processor, as I talked about, APR, is now only accepting items that can be recycled in Australia, which is aimed at helping growing the local industry and ensuring that ensuring a local recycling market, and that things stay on shore and reduce our overall carbon footprint. This means that some things that we used to put in the bin, like milk and juice cartons, this includes your long life milks, your non-lactose milks that come in a product called Tetra Pak, including aerosol cans, bottle lids, and a lot of plastics are actually no longer going to be accepted in the yellow bin. And this is going to be a big, big change for the community. So we're saying yes to higher grade plastics. That is plastic bottles that have a label with a number 1 and a number 2, and plastic food containers that have a plastic label number 5. So that's like your butters, margarines, meat trays, dip containers. There's quite a few materials that have plastic number 5. And the other materials will still be accepting a paper and cardboard, steel cans, tins, aluminium cans, aluminium foil, and metal lids. But importantly, we won't be taking glass. As I said, the food and drink cartons, like milk and juice cartons that are made of that composite material, aerosol cans, lids, and a lot of other plastics, including all the things that we never accepted but people still put in there: coffee cups, plastic bags, soft plastics. I mean, you name a product, it's gone in the recycling bin. It's a mess in there. So yeah, that's the changes to the recycling bin. I suppose just to delve down a little bit more into plastics. Plastics is a bit of a minefield, and I can talk about this a little bit later, but I think it's really important to understand that the numbers and symbols found on the bottom of plastic items are not actually recycling symbols, despite them sort of looking like recycling symbols. They're actually plastic identification codes, which tell you what type of plastic it's made from. So there's about 7 or so different plastic resins, and this is how they identify it. Different recycling processes in Australia accept different types of plastics based on the end markets that they've got available to them. And as I've talked through, we are going to be accepting very different plastics to a lot of other councils. The fact of the matter is that local end markets for plastic recycling are very, very limited. And it's going to be a while before a lot of these new markets open up. You know, we're looking at a system where crude oil is at record low prices, and often recycling plastic is a lot more expensive than new plastic is a lot cheaper than recycling plastic. And so the market itself for plastics in a way has failed recycling as an outcome. It's not to say that market interventions like taxes and government mandated by recycle targets and further regulation won't change the plastic market. And we will see that happen. I mean, other big packaging manufacturers like Pepsi and Coke now have, you know, public commitments to plastic recycled content. So that will change, but it's going to take some time. So as I talked about, we are taking a very few number of plastics. I just thought I would quickly tell you where these plastics are going to end up. So our plastic code 1, which is a PET, and these are usually the bottles that we're accepting will be made into new plastic bottles. Plastic 2, which is made of a product called HDPE bottles, they'll be made into plastic bollards, pallets, fencing, barrier railings, and deck boards. There's also plastic 2 HDPE laundry bottles. So laundry bottles and like shampoo bottles, a lot of those are made of plastic 2. They're going to get made into new bottles. So the highest quality plastics are your number 1 and your number 2. Then your plastic code 5, which is made of a product called polypropylene resin, they'll be made into new food grade containers and casings around electric cabling. So yeah, as I said, plastics is a complex and challenging space for the industry, and I don't think packaging labelling does much to help, if I'm honest. Many plastic products are made of composite materials, so they might have 1 or 2 plastics in them, which makes it even harder to recycle because usually you need a single stream. And then the other issue we've got from an education perspective is that telling people just to put in like plastic punnets doesn't solve the issue if one manufacturer uses one type of plastic for their punnet and the other manufacturer uses a different type of plastic. So we've gone with the coding system to identify what goes in and out of that bin. Now, I think what I'll do is I'll just play this video, and then, because it's all about what I've just talked about, and then I'll stop for questions. Another council that has rolled out a 4-bin system and is using the same recycling processor is Hobson's Bay. And they've done this video with the recycling processor APR to show you what happens at the facility. So I thought I would share it. It goes for about 4 minutes, and then I'll pause for questions. Oh, sorry.
Sophie, we're struggling with the sound a little bit, actually, to be honest.
Oh, sorry. I don't really know if I can turn it. It won't go any louder on. Oh. Can you not hear it all?
It's not clear.
And it's also freezing.
Is that okay? Okay, maybe if I just give me a second. It's a shame because it is good. Let me see if I play it directly from YouTube, if that makes a difference. Is that any better?
No.
No.
Oh, well, that's a shame. I don't really know if there's a technical fix for that, unfortunately. What I can do is send it round. Shane, when you do a follow-up, I can provide the link and maybe you can send it round in the email.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry about that.
Unless
that's
it's something
fine.
to do with my Zoom. I don't know whether it's anything to do with the fact we're recording as well, or I don't know. Unless anyone's got any suggestions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But well, maybe we'll just stop for questions now. And then, so as soon as a few pop up in the chat, and then we can keep going.
Sure. So, I mean, maybe we'll throw, Jessie, you've got a couple of questions. Maybe we'll throw to you. You'd like to ask Sophie your questions. Maybe, Jessie, maybe you're mute. Sarah, could you please unmute?
Asking her to unmute.
Hello?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great.
I did have a few questions. I know that you've covered a few things, like you said, the Tetra Paks can no longer go to be recycled by Yarra. So are we now sending those to landfill?
Yes. I can talk to Tetra Paks. So there is not a single processing piece of technology in Australia that processes Tetra Pak. I've had this confirmed on multiple occasions by different people across the industry. What's been happening with Tetra Paks is it's been going in the mixed load, sorted at the facility and then sent overseas. And then there's different standards and technology overseas for processing Tetra Paks. So I can tell you in terms of keeping things on shore, other councils that are accepting Tetra Paks, they're not staying on shore unless they're being sent to landfill. We'd prefer to be, I suppose, transparent about that and say that until such time when there is that technology here, we're not going to be telling people it goes in a recycling bin. The long-term play on Tetra Paks that I've heard is that they can melt it, because the thing is, it's a composite material. It's made of cardboard, plastic and aluminium foil. So separating out those materials is very energy and water intensive. So the process that they're looking into is actually about melting it and turning it into plasterboard for construction, but quite a long way off that stuff being ready in Australia.
Okay, but other councils are still accepting that?
Yes, they are, yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned before about glass jars, if they had paper labels, they're okay to recycle. What about if they've got plastic labels?
I mean, it's the same issue. Like if you can take them off, it's great. It will interfere with the the crushing process, and it might bring down the quality. But I mean, we will accept them. Yeah, and same with in a wine bottle, how you've got that metal cap at the top that sits below, the twist off. So what happens at the glass sorting facility is that they have a magnet that pulls off metal from the glass. So those products, what happens is it'll suck towards the magnet and then swipe off any part of the bottle that's got that metal. So the glass that's in there actually gets lost. So if you do want to be a really legendary recycler, you can try to pull those metal things off. But yeah, not practical for some people.
So in regards to the plastic labels, some of them peel off really easily and others are almost impossible to remove. So would that be more just emailing the manufacturer directly and saying, hey, could you change the glue that, you adhese your labels with?
Yeah, or tell them that they need to not use a plastic label at all. Like, packaging, the packaging industry has a lot to answer in terms of this. Like one plastic bottle, like your Schweppes bottle, has 3 different types of material on it. It's got a plastic lid that's made from one plastic, the plastic base, which is another plastic, and then the paper. Now, why are we making products that have 3 different types of materials on them? We should be trying to move towards single stream. So yeah, putting the pressure on packaging manufacturers to try to clean up the materials that they're putting out into the system is a big part of this whole problem.
And on to composting. So Yarra won't be getting compost bins individually until you said 2021, hopefully.
Yeah.
Are there any community composting sites that you can drop off your food scraps to at the moment?
Yeah, there are, and there's a couple of different ways to find those. So Yarra has a resource on the website called the Zero Waste Map. And if you go to the food waste category, it's basically an online directory of places that of like recycling, reuse, reduce initiatives across the municipality. If you go to the food waste category, there should be a community drop-off like function, and you can see where you can drop them off. The other place you can look at is share waste, although I think because of COVID, a lot of places have been not taking community compost from residents. And we're also, Yarra's looking into a trial at the moment for food and garden waste drop off at the depot, but we're just working through some of that proposal at the moment.
Did you,
Okay, no.
Hi Jessie, did you see my message in the chat? I work at the Carlton Neighbourhood Learning Centre and there's a compost hub there.
Okay, no worries. I'm Richmond, so I was hoping for something a little closer.
Okay. I think there's one at the other neighbourhood house in Richmond. Sorry, the name.
I'll check on the zero waste map and see if it's on there. But thank you for that.
Centre.
And so the last question that the little plastic lids that come like on the Tetra Packs and other items, so they can't be recycled?
No, in the rubbish bin.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I think there's a kindergarten in Richmond, isn't there, where they have a compost bin too? I forget the name of it, a childcare centre. Sophie, I don't know.
Yeah, most of the neighbourhood houses have collections. I don't remember off the top of my head, I have to say, but if it's available, it should be on the zero waste map, but I will double check that.
They've been doing it for quite a long time, but I can't remember its name. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's on Kent Street, maybe. Anyway, yeah.
Could be.
Thanks, Jessie. That's some great questions. Moving right along, Janet had one question there earlier on in the chat. Janet, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I was a bit curious about what sort of contamination was particularly noticeable in the yellow bins in the test site.
As in the like what is contamination and the different types that we get? Is that what the question is?
Yes. Well, I suppose I'm interested in what it is now out of all our yellow lidded bins, but particularly in the Abbotsford test area.
Yeah, okay. Look, there is so many different types of contamination. So basically, there's 3 different types of contamination. This is what I was going to talk about in the next slide. It's when items are dirty and haven't been emptied. So we would consider that contamination. A lot of food residue, especially on plastic and cardboard. When non-recyclable items are put in the recycling bin or non-glass items in the glass bin. And then when recycling is in a plastic bag, that creates a lot of issues as well. And then you've just got a myriad of things that people put in, like we get clothing, electronic waste, garden waste, household waste. People think that just because it could be recycled, it can go in the curbside bin. So in terms of what we've seen in the trial area, our contamination approach was really targeted at improving the quality of glass. So we went really hard on the glass bin. And as I showed you before, the results are pretty good. We've only had about 3% contamination, and it's mainly lids on. We need lids off those jars. That's the main thing for the glass. For the yellow bin, well, we're still seeing bagged recycling, soft plastics. But the main thing we're seeing also is, the wrong type of plastic, because we're very specific about the type of plastic. And then we're still seeing coffee cups, and then, Tetra Paks, as I talked about before, they'd be the main things. So we're going to have to refocus our contamination management approach in the trial area, as well as more broadly across the council. I mean, just to talk through why contamination is an issue, because we're talking about it. I mean, essentially sending things to the facility that simply aren't recyclable means that sorters have to try and pick out the wrong things. And this is usually done by hand. And those things get put in a pile and then taken to a landfill. So by sending things to the wrong facility, we have to, we extend, and then having to send a landfill, the carbon cost of that transport and the cost to council for then having to divert it to the landfill, it costs us a lot more. So that's a big issue. The other issue is that bagged recyclables, so when people put their items in bags, and this happens a lot in multi-unit developments because people put all their recyclables in a bag and take it down to a communal bin. Now, what happens is they'll just get picked off the line in these bags, and then all the materials in there that could have been recycled on the line, separated, they will just get lost. They'll get put in the landfill pile and get taken to a landfill. The other issue, just going back to the lids, as I talked about, is that it sort of interferes with the sorting process. Soft plastics get caught in the machinery because they use these sieves. So soft plastics are really bad. And then the wrong types of plastic are just very hard to identify. So they'll often get put in the wrong stream, and then it basically lowers the quality of the material. So that's sort of the issue of contamination. And really, really bad contamination, where we're talking 30% or more of a bin and more, 30% of a load. They won't even bother sorting it. They'll take it straight to the landfill because they're like, this has got no value to us. It's too much money and energy for us to sort through this stuff.
Fantastic. There's a lot of questions coming through, which is awesome. So we had a question from just Lisa. Lisa, do you want to ask your question, Sophie?
Lisa, you might need to unmute. I'm not sure if you're
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just having a tech issue for a second.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm changing rooms as well, and then I just kicked the cat accidentally. It's just been a disaster. I was just wondering, I think you kind of answered my question before. It was around, well, who's responsible then for the changes to, plastic types, and how do we get these more narrowed down to a smaller range so it's more straightforward, so there's not errors made by the companies who make food or goods or whatever? How does that happen? And, how do we help as consumers to push the issue, you know?
Yeah, look, I think this is a really critical part to this whole problem. Is we're in the business of managing the downstream end of waste, right? So like we get given whatever's there and we're going to try to figure out what to do with it and try to make the best value out of it. But where there's huge gains to be made is controlling what comes in upstream. So at the moment we have, there is something like just tens of thousands of different types of plastics out there. Things are not labeled consistently. Things have recycling symbols on them that don't actually relate to what is genuinely recyclable. Everything is technically recyclable. That doesn't mean we have a process to recycle it. So contacting your big packaging manufacturers, to ask them to think about what their products are, to make sure they're talking to industry like recycling processors to understand what the challenges are in terms of sorting and processing it, is definitely something that I would encourage everyone in the community to do. We will probably do some, like Yarra as a council advocates about packaging reform and packaging labelling to all the avenues that we can, but it is really a consumer-driven movement. So refusing packaging that is not recyclable, single-use plastics, and then trying to avoid as much packaging as possible in the supermarket is another big action that people can take. We've got a long way to go on plastics. The government is trying to incentivise better packaging labelling and better packaging use. And they're putting in mandates around recycled product, like having to put recycled content in your packaging to try to create that local market as well. So there is stuff happening in this area, but we're definitely a long way off it being a perfect system.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ty. Lily had a question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for tonight. It's really interesting. I was so excited when I opened my front door this morning. My new glass bin was there. It was awesome. I was just curious. I think poor Philip did this thing with the glass bin where they put it in a communal spot, and so instead of everyone getting individual glass bins, like everyone was just dropping it off to that communal bin. Because I really like, Fitzroy, and then there's the library, and then you've got the e-waste bin there and clothing drop-off bins there, and I thought, wouldn't it be good to have the glass bin there? So just wondering what that decision-making process was. And then secondly, when the CDS comes into effect, like what's the trajectory, like how will that affect our individual household glass bins? Thanks.
Yep. In terms of the decision around curbside versus communal recycling, from what I've heard, we might look into community drop-offs for glass later on down the track. But at the end of the day, we need to get glass out of the curbside recycling bin. And the recycling and all the data shows that if you give someone a bin at source, they're going to be much more responsible with how they separate out their different waste streams. So the priority for us was really about getting that glass out of that stream at the curbside, making it really convenient for most people. Now we appreciate that not everyone has space for those bins and also don't produce a lot of glass. So, there is an option to not have that bin, and we will have a glass drop off at the depot. I suppose, the priority has definitely been the curbside, but not to say that later on down the track we might do community drop-offs as well. In terms of the second part, which was, what was the second part of the question?
It was just about how the CDS will impact the glass bin.
Yeah. So my understanding is the CDS, they're not going to be collecting glass. It was announced that it's going to be plastic, probably PET bottles, maybe HDPE, so high quality plastics and aluminium cans.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Different from the other states.
Yeah, it might be that they have glass. I'm not sure. That detail definitely hasn't come out yet. I know that the state government's still working on it, but yeah, at the end of the day, we know that the most effective way to improve the recyclability of materials is at the curbside. They're sort of like additional ways to incentivize better recycling and sorting behaviours like CDSs. But the curbside is where the real gains can be made.
Well, thanks.
I have a couple of questions, Sophie, myself. Can you perhaps talk about, why did Yarra decide to go its own way in relation to this area rather than partner with some adjoining councils to do something collectively? What was the thinking around that?
As in partner?
Oh, just partner to to do something consistent with what the surrounding councils are doing? Why did Yarra decide to do something? Why did Darebin decide to do something else, and Moreland something different? What was the, is there any advantage in councils working, collectively on this issue, or is it just, everyone comes to their own decision about what they want to do for their particular, for their area? What was the thinking?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think, well, the first thing I'd say is that we have a very engaged and progressive community that are pushing us on sustainability outcomes. And with the recycling crisis being such a prominent issue, there's an expectation from the community that we need to be doing better. So the first one, in terms of why we went our own way, I mean, there's a couple of reasons for that. Mainly the fact that we were with, so our recycling processor at the time when the recycling crisis hit and we could no longer export materials overseas, we actually decided to change recycling processes because they had broken our contract and moved to another one. And that provided us with an opportunity to go, well, hang on a second, let's rethink this model. We know glass is an issue. If we're going to have to go back to a domestic market, and those markets, the international markets, have closed up and we've gotten out of this contract, then we can actually reshape the way we're doing it. And that provided us with an opportunity to think differently. Just
jumping in there. So why hasn't every council had, every council's got the same issue? Why haven't other councils done similar thinking and come to similar conclusions as Yarra? How do you think about that? I mean, why is Yarra doing this, but then some other councillors faced with exactly the same issues deciding to do something completely different, or something a little bit different anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I don't really know. Can't speak for other councils. This has been an issue that's been happening. I mean, why haven't they done it still? The markets are closing up. China has said by early 2021, they're not going to be accepting any recyclable materials. So where are those councils sending that material? And those, I don't know.
Right.
It's a very good question. I think, in terms of working with other councils, I mean, we do work with other councils. Hobson's Bay, as I said, have rolled out a similar model that was based on Yarra's. We've shared all the learnings from our trial with other councils. I think Massive and Rangers has done the same. We have catch-ups with Hobson Bay to share lessons learned, to talk about challenges. So we do collaborate, and there is there is some potential projects in the back around some more localized processing and stuff that Yarra is talking to other councils about. But councils working together, it takes time, I suppose. So we've just kind of been on a mission to clean up our waste. But yeah, we do collaborate where we can. I might just turn my light on. It's getting really dark in here.
When you were talking about glass to glass recycling, would we need to completely rethink the way we do collect the glass? Because you'll still get a lot of smashed glass, even if you've got a glass only bin. I assume that there's just a truck and it gets tipped into the truck. I assume that some amount of, that in that process, glass is always going to get smashed.
Yeah.
Would we need to, how do we handle it with kid gloves so that it actually doesn't get smashed in the process?
It's not that the glass is broken, that's the issue. So once it gets taken, it's just the type of glass. So when the glass into the beneficiation sorting facility, it all gets crushed. That's like the first thing that happens. And then the better quality, and then it gets sorted into different glass streams. So as long as we can say that what's in that glass, high quality, clean glass, that will keep the value of the entire glass load up.
Right, perfect.
Did you want me just to finish off the rest of the presentation and then just close out any questions at the end?
That would be awesome. Yes, please. That'd be great.
Okay, great. So I've talked about contamination, and yeah, I think It's a really important part to this whole model that we are going to be really proactively managing contamination. And how we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. Firstly, we're really improving the way we collect our contamination data. So we are launching our curbside crews, our collection crews are going to be doing visual inspections of all the bins, and any identifiable contamination they can see, they will sticker that bin, mark the sticker with what the contamination is, and actually leave it behind and then you'll have to remove the contamination item, call up council, and then we'll come collect it. So that's one of the first things we're doing. We're then also going to be getting much better data from our material recovery facility, the recycling processor, about what issues they're seeing at their end. And then we're going to be feeding this information back to the community. We're hoping that within sort of the first 6 months of the new service, we will have such good data that, we might be able to hit local hotspots. So one street that's really struggling on these particular items, we can letterbox drop them, we can do door knocks, we can invite them to a webinar to really hone in on that waste education aspect. And then just to go to the point around multi-unit developments, we know multi-unit developments are going to be a big challenge for Yarra. We service a lot of them. There's like 850 to 900 multi-unit developments, and we have some of the largest in Melbourne. And I believe, yes, we've got some residents from Acacia Place here tonight who would know about the contamination challenges at multi-unit developments. We're doing some proactive outreach and engagement with property managers. We've developed a whole new suite of collateral and toolkits on how to set up best practice waste management systems there. We'll be doing face-to-face on the ground education sessions, going out to the facilities, checking that they've got, the right mix of bins. We've got signage that we can stick up. We've got newsletter content. We've got a whole new suite of stuff that we can support to help support multi-unit developments. It's definitely, there's no quick fix to it, but we are trying to gear up our work in that space because we know it's going to be a big issue. I think I've already really covered that we're moving to fortnightly collections. I think the final thing I really wanted to close out on is, sort of that we are very committed to working with the Yarra community to provide options around the service. We know that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. There's lots of different housing types in Yarra, and so not everyone's going to want a third bin. We've got different bin sizes. We've got bin sharing options, and if you don't want a bin, you can opt out, and we will. And there's also a community drop-off at the Clifton Hill Depot for people that barely produce waste, glass waste, which is awesome if you do. The other thing, as I talked about, is we've really ramped up our education and communications on this. So we would have loved to have done a lot more face-to-face events and done a bit of a community roadshow, gotten out to all schools, fates, libraries, whatever. Obviously, COVID's put a big spanner in the works there. So we have designed a raft of tools to help support the community through these changes. And we're in the final stages of updating all the information and content on the website. Including, we've done a new and improved A to Z guide. So this is a really comprehensive list of like all your household materials, whether it tells you what bin they go in, and if they don't go in a curbside bin, where you can take them to be recycled or how you properly dispose of them. And that guide will be, the updated guide will be available just before the new, the first bin gets collected on the 23rd of November. We've got new toolkits for commercial businesses and for multi-unit development residents and property managers. As I talked about, we've got this Yarra Zero Waste Map, which is a directory of all your waste minimisation needs. We've got new service collateral. We've got translated signage into 8 different languages. We're going to do some more webinars later in November, one for property managers of multi-unit developments, and also we're going to do one probably targeted for like kids and families through the libraries. And we're also developing a short video animation series that will launch after November that really targets contamination and correct material acceptance in the yellow and purple bins. And then finally, we've got an option for people to subscribe to an SMS service where you can get weekly reminders about when to put your bin out, which bin is going out, and some reminders about what goes in the bin. So I suppose my call to action for everyone here is to become a recycling revolutionary. And to do this, it's, I'm asking people to update their recycling knowledge, getting right what you put in each bin, always taking the lids off your products and making sure material is clean and dry, so managing your contamination. Check the numbers on plastics before you put them in the bin. And I suppose be mindful about the types of packaging that you're buying. Try and minimise plastics as much as you can, or only buy plastics that you know can be recycled in the yellow bin, which is your plastics 1 and 2 and 5s. And then buy products that have recycled content in them. So this creates a local market and supports a local industry. As an example, you know, Reflex paper is made in Victoria and has a high percentage of recycled paper in it. And then share these tips with friends. Yeah, try to spread the word. At the end of the day, the success of the new model really depends on every individual in Yarra being more conscious about their waste and what they're buying and how they're disposing and sorting their waste. So it's up to all of us to get it right. Great. So any other questions? Yeah, so that's awesome, Sophie. Andy had just shot through a question. Andy, do you want to ask the question you just put through?
Yeah, what I was saying is one of the things that I think leads to people being confused about recycling, because I think most people want to do the right thing, but they don't know, because every different council area has different requirements because they have different companies doing the collection. And how do we overcome this problem?
Yeah, it's a big challenge and a big gripe of mine when I came into the industry. So in terms of the state government is, as part of their reform, is launching a new body that will be an amalgamation of some existing state government entities called the Waste Authority. And their role will be to legislate and provide standards around curbside bins and curbside collections. So as I talked about, some of that will be standardising the colours, and it will also be standardising what goes in each bin. So for example, with Tetra Paks, we're not telling people that you can put Tetra Paks in your bin if there's no local end market and it can't be recycled on shore. So we're hoping that the state government will take a lead on trying to provide some standards across the state for what's collected, to try to minimise this issue, because as you've identified, it is a very big one around confusion in the community. The other thing is that the state government will also be doing we're launching huge new education and awareness campaigns around recycling. Sustainability Victoria is currently in the process of developing those campaigns. I'm sitting on the working group for that, and so I'm feeding into it, and I'm very strongly advocating that we need some consistency around the message. So if there's a question mark about whether or not to be recycled, please don't put it in that campaign. We need to be telling people that you can only put things in there that we know have a local recycling market. So, I mean, hopefully some of these things create a bit of a race to the top around recycling education information that improves that consistency. And yeah, otherwise there will be variations at the local council level. That will always happen. But yeah, I'm hopeful that there will be some improvements around that in the next few years.
Great. And Sarah had a question as well. I think it's quite relevant. Sarah, do you want to ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, Sophie. I just interested in public housing. My understanding is that public housing buildings don't come into Yarra Waste Revolution.
So in the trial public housing buildings, so it depends on the building. There's like tall buildings and short buildings. Understanding is that we are rolling out the service to the lower density public housing buildings, but that the large multi-unit developments, which are particularly difficult to work with because, I mean, yeah, contamination is very high, but we won't be rolling out to those large facilities. It's essentially a real issue. We've been talking to DHHS about how we manage this. Expectation is around rolling out 3 to 4 bins to public housing, and we still haven't sort of gotten clarity on that yet. But eventually, I think they will probably have to come on board, but it just might take more time.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, the people in those buildings are members of Yarra. They're part of our community, and I think, yeah, I absolutely understand that DHHS needs to be involved and assist council with resourcing. But I think it's a really great tactic to talk to DHHS, because yeah, it's a lot of people and a lot of education that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
yeah.
and the other question, I guess, relates a little bit to that with the stickers. I mean, you might have somebody who's got no idea what to do or how to read the sticker, and their bin sits there unemptied. Like, what is there a process around that for assisting people who may not understand?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. So we have, with all our service collateral, tried to design it in a way that is as accessible as possible. So obviously people speak different languages, but with the images and the visual prompts around, you know, what is a contaminant and what's on this thing, we've tried to make that as accessible as possible, and we've done a fair bit of user testing around those. But if a bin does get stickered and left, and it doesn't get removed and it's left on the street, it will probably become an issue for local laws. They do patrol the streets, and then neighbours can also call up or write to council and let us know that it hasn't been attended to. So yeah, there's definitely no easy fix on that, and we'll probably just have to work with residents and the community to try to work through that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sophie, I had a question. What's Yarra itself doing in terms of creating end markets for recycled product?
Yep. That's a very good question. So, I mean, I think with the road base, for example, so we have, like, the glass from some of the trial has gone into road base that has been we've used in local road upgrades. So that's one quick fix that we've been doing. However, that's just one small thing. In terms of buying recycled, Yarra doesn't really have a buy recycled policy yet, or a circular economy policy. It is something that is in the works. But yeah, it's definitely, from a procurement point of view, we do have a role to play in this. And yeah, probably not quite there yet really with it, but it should be a priority of council. Yeah, and lobby your councillors to prioritize it.
Perfect. And I guess just when other councils have gone through this process, I assume that other councils do have these dedicated glass bins. I mean, I guess you've learnt from them, what is the main hurdles that need to be surmounted before, you know, to make this really successful?
Yeah. So the main hurdles are probably around adoption and compliance. So people understanding that source separation is the new way forward for waste management from the curbside, and in that they need to take responsibility for source separation, and then compliance to the specific material acceptance that we have in each bin. I mean, glass is not going to be so much of an issue. We know from the trial that with some proactive communication, with good contamination management and bin stickering, we can get the glass stream looking pretty good within probably, 6 months. But we know that the recycling bin is going to take a lot longer, and it's going to be a long journey, especially because of how specific we're having to be around plastics. We're utilising the same tools and tactics, but yeah, it's going to be a longer journey. And then the other major challenge for Yarra, as I've touched on, is definitely multi-unit developments. They're known for having very high contamination. I mean, the major issue is that, there's in a lot of those buildings, it's very hard to create accountability for who's putting contamination in the bin. We will, as I said, be working directly with property managers at multi-unit developments. And I believe even we'll be running a separate truck. They might have a separate collection day for some of them, so that we can really focus in on the contamination data and understanding what is in that stream, what's causing the issues. So yeah, the multi-unit developments is going to be, it's a big beast, but my team will be pivoting to work doing a lot of proactive engagement with them next year.
Awesome, that's great. And just on that point, did you have a question about? You've obviously you're in an MUD. What do you have any questions you'd like to we were talking just briefly before the webinar started. Do you have any questions you'd like to throw to Sophie while you have a chance?
It's John here, and
John.
Yeah, and doing something else. My question is about data for each of the multi-unit developments. I mean, we've got so much here. The truck comes in and he spends ages picking up. Do you weigh each truck so you can then start getting the split between recyclables, waste? Where's that data come from? Because that would be something that could feed back to the residents. Yeah, definitely. So the contamination data gets measured at the material recovered facility. So it essentially, the truck goes to the facility and gets weighed on a weight bridge. And then that data is actually used to invoice council. So it is it's accurate and important data, because that's pretty much how much we pay. In terms of the, measuring the contamination in a load, that's going to be measured a couple of different ways. Or we're going to have to do a big baseline audit of our of the whole service, which will be like a sample size. We'll probably do that once a year, but then we'll be doing weekly, regular sort of sample audits at the facility, where they sort of measure out. They pick a sample of material and they say, right, 30% is contamination or 20% is contamination. These are the types of contaminated issues based on that sample. And yeah, the contamination thing is a critical one, because the more contaminated the load is, actually the more expensive it is for us it costs council money. So there's a very strong business case around reducing contamination. Yeah, what I was getting at is not so much the contamination, as just how many tons of glass you're getting, how many tons of the mixed recyclables, how many tons of garbage, what's the split between them. You can put load cells or whatever in the arms as you pick the bins up, and you can see what's going on. Yeah. And that way you can say to a multi-unit development, this is the change that's happened. This is what's happening at your place. Yeah. So that is a very good point. And we are looking into a lot of that can be supported by better bin technology. So yeah, like cameras on the bins and weights on the bins. And that's something I think we're looking into, and maybe doing a trial with a couple of multi-unit developments. I'm not sure where that's at, but that is how my understanding of how that sort of data is recorded on site. Okay.
Excellent. Andy, had another brief question just in relation to the recycling depot in Clifton Hill. Andy, did you want to ask, just briefly ask that question?
Sure. I was just wondering whether it had opened up again. I know it closed through the COVID period.
Yeah, it hasn't opened up yet, but we're waiting for advice, I'm pretty sure, from DHHS about that. I haven't heard anything the last few days, but as soon as we get that, like all transfer stations and depots have been closed. As soon as we get the green light from the government, we'll put out some communications across Yarra's channels about it being open again.
Thanks.
Perfect. Well, I think that about wraps up proceedings this evening. So, Sophie, thank you so much for a really informative talk. I think there's, lots for everyone to think about, and I'm sure that we all took something practical away and something that we can spread. And the message that you delivered tonight is something we can spread through our own network, so that everyone hopefully can get up to speed as quickly as possible on this really important issue. So, and if anyone missed anything, because it was quite fact dense. So if anyone missed anything and thinks they might benefit from a rewatch of what happened tonight, we'll have this presentation up on YCAN's website and YouTube channel within the next few days. And that's also the place, of course, that you catch up with all of the previous webinars in this series. So, please reference again the YCAN website and the YCAN YouTube channel. So just before we wrap up, just a quick plug for the YCAN's final webinar for 2020, which will be held on Wednesday, the 18th of November. Our guest speaker will be Pete Mercurio from the Yarra Energy Foundation. The Yarra Energy Foundation does awesome work in helping households in Yarra and beyond to reduce their energy consumption and to transition away from fossil fuel-based energy sources. We're really delighted to have Pete talk to us and to give us some update on the Yarra Energy Foundation's current initiatives. So I hope you can join us for that webinar coming up in a month's time. And with that, I'll close the evening. Thank you so much again, Sophie, for an excellent time, and thank you for everyone for giving time out on your Wednesday evening. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.